Welcome inside this edition of Big Ten Today. Thrilled to be alongside Jake Butt. I'm Rick Pizzo. We'll hear from another Michigan man coming up a little bit later in the show. My exclusive interview with Wolverine first-year head man Sharon Moore. Plus, Jake is going to name his Big Ten freaks. Should be a lot of fun. A lot of guys to choose from. I'm intrigued to see who actually makes your list. And I'm going to guess plenty of guys from your alma mater and from Ohio State as well.
We could make a whole we could spend a whole show talking about the freaks on both rosters, but I got one from each, and of course I have to have one tight end as well, Rick.
We're
checking all the boxes.
Of course you do. It is always tight end day. There's National Tight End Day one day a year, but when Jake Butt is in the studio, it is every single day. We'll get to that list in just a bit, but we begin with our big story taking us to Columbus, where the Buckeyes open the season as one of this league's and one of the nation's preseason faves. OSU has yet to name a starting QB, though veteran transfer Will Howard appears to be the favorite. The Buckeyes also appear loaded at almost every position group, including and perhaps especially at wide receiver and running back. So let's take you inside that running back room. Travion Henderson returns. He's joined in the backfield by Ole Miss transfer Quinshon Judkins. And look at how insanely similar the career stats are for these guys. Now, OSU has utilized a two-back system in recent years, and with the goal to play 16 games this year on its way to a national title game appearance, there's no question, two sets of legs better than one. Here's first-year running backs coach Carlos Lachlan.
From the first day I got here at April 2nd, I told them we're going to learn how to be one. It doesn't cost you anything to celebrate another man's success. See, so many people get caught up in this game of these accolades. I tell the kids all the time, don't get caught up reading your newspaper clipping. I'm going to hold you accountable, but we're going to learn how to play as one in there. If Trey has success, that means Q, James, Sam, Chase, Cisse, we all had success. So when your number call go, we ain't got no choice. You learn to be one. So I told them day one, they got to feed off one another. But they work well together. They pushing one another. We all competing. No, they're competing to be the best backs in the country. I'm competing to be the best running back coach in the country. So it's all healthy, but they both are being great leaders in the room. They're doing a good job. As a running back coach, you want your guys to have the ball. So, I'm excited to see how things going to look when the season starts. With Coach Kelly calling plays and him and Coach Day, like you talking about these two, like two of the top brains in the game. So I'm excited to see how it's going to go.
It's a good problem to have, but it's interesting to see how Ohio State will management. Chip Kelly, obviously a terrific play caller. Ryan Day, a terrific play caller. It's going to be Chip's offense to run as Ryan switches to become the CEO, as he calls it, this Ohio State football program. And we'll get into the position groups, the running backs, the outstanding wide receivers in just a minute. But I am more interested in the mentality because Ohio State has admitted it. I think Ryan Day has intimated it. This is all or nothing for Ohio State. After 3 straight losses to Michigan, after what the Wolverines have done, but also when you consider what Michigan has lost, I think there's a lot of folks in and outside Columbus right now that believe this has to be the year for Ohio State.
Absolutely, it certainly does. I know Ohio State couldn't possibly be more all in than they are right now. You look at the offseason moves they made. You bring in one of the most talented freshmen we've seen in a Jeremiah Smith. You go to the transfer portal and get Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs, two of the best at their position. You go get Chip Kelly, one of the great offensive minds, who was a head coach and now is your play caller for Ohio State. And he's got a relationship with Ryan Day. And then, Rick, I think about, and this has parallels to my senior year, the veterans and experience of the guys on the Buckeye roster that could have left for the NFL looked around and said, one, we have unfinished business, but two, if we come back and we're in alignment in this program, we can do something extremely special this year. So I say all that to say this, they have so much talent. The resources are on the table, but you mentioned the word mindset. Talent has not been the issue for the Buckeyes these past years. You cannot tell me these past 3 years that it was a lack of talent for why they didn't reach their goals. So the mindset's an interesting piece, and you can start to look at some of these cues, and I'll give you one example. Kyle McCord, before the Ohio State-Michigan game last year, he said, and I get it, it's a high-pressure game. He said, listen, win or lose, at the end of the day, it's just a game. And I understand it, but you can't say that. You cannot say that.
It's not just a game.
Night and day to Will Howard, who hasn't even been here for a year. I'm listening to one of his interviews, and they're asking Will Howard, hey, what's your experience with this talent? Like, tell us about the talent on the roster this year. And Will Howard shut that down right away. He said, listen, I get it that people think we're talented, but we want to be known for our physicality and our toughness this year. Out of everything that's happened this offseason, that would be the reason I would be getting excited if I was Buckeye fans.
And I think you can also sell this all-in mentality a little bit easier this year than in years past because of the expanded playoff. Ohio State has an early game against Oregon. Buckeyes could play really well and find a way to lose that game. And in years past, if the mentality at the start of the year is we're all in, we got to win it all, and you lose a game in early to mid-October, you can start going to a bad, dark place. I don't think that's the situation anymore because you still have Michigan at the end of the year, and all you need to win the national championship this year is a seat at the table to be one of the 12 highest-ranked teams in early December.
You're right. You have a little bit of a buffer, but I still again,
I'm not saying you're going to use the buffer going into any game, but it does exist in the back of everybody's minds.
Yes, but they're still going, say they did lose or say they did play less than perfect. That's still going to be a mental hurdle that they're going to have to address because of this Buckeye team should be going into this season saying no one can beat us. When we talk about the most talented rosters in college football, the first team that comes to nearly everybody's mind is this Ohio State roster. So they're going to go into every game fully expecting to win, as they should. So even if they do lose, like, that's going to be something that they have to overcome, knowing that that's on them. But when I look at in the Oregon game as a perfect example for what I think needs to happen for Ohio State this year. We talk about Jeremiah Smith, Ibuka. We talked about those talented running backs. We talk about this Buckeye defense. They're going on the road to Oregon. What I think needs to happen, and what will be a good indication of a true change in Columbus, is an emphasis on physicality and an emphasis on that run game. And that's where I think Chip Kelly was such a great hire, because as great of an offensive mind as he has coordinated some phenomenal rushing attacks. So I can see this now. You have Judkins, you have Trey Henderson in the backfield, and you got Will Howard, a guy that can run the ball as well as at the quarterback. You know what takes a crowd out of the game? You know what makes your opponent feel hopeless? A 10-play drive that's 7 minutes come off the clock, and you are just running it. Ohio State is a Lamborghini. They can beat you with some sexy plays. Jeremiah Smith can take a slant, 80 yards to the house. So can Ibuka. But what I want to see for Ohio State this year is lining up and running the ball. I go back to their 2014 season.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I was just about to say the exact same thing.
What do you remember? 85 yards through the heart of the South.
Sledgehammer game against Alabama. That is what Urban Meyer called it. They didn't win that national championship because they were throwing it deep, because Devin Smith was going to grab it.
Yeah.
They ran it because that offensive line was blocking its tail off.
Yes.
Wide receivers were blocking their tail off, and running backs were dominating between the tackles.
And they could throw it, and they did throw it.
Part of the reason they could throw it was because defenses had to respect the toughness up front.
Yes, and I know this from being on sidelines in the NFL and college. It is a hopeless feeling when you're seeing your opponent hand the ball off and rip off 6-yard carries and 8-yard carries, and you just sit there and say, man, you can, if Jeremiah Smith goes and mosses somebody for a 40-yard touchdown, and he will, you say, all right, listen, that's going to happen. Okay, all good. But if Ohio State is running the ball for 50, 60 yards in a drive and your crowd is completely silent, that is such a tough feeling to overcome. 85 yards to the heart of the South with Ezekiel Elliott. He had one of the best 3-game stretches in college football history running the ball. That entire offensive line went to the NFL. The Ohio State has those exact same ingredients this year, and I think they will benefit significantly, especially with how talented that defense is, by putting a big-time emphasis on running the football.
Sawyer, JTT, Denzel, why are they all back? Because they have no gold pants. That is probably the biggest reason. Yes, they all won a national championship, but you know Columbus very well.
Yeah.
You played at Michigan. You have both sides of this rivalry. If you leave either school without ever having beaten the other one and you spent 4 years there, it's something you have to live with the rest of your life.
Listen, I'll tell you what that was like. I grew up in Columbus. I look at my career with great joy. I had an awesome time. I love the sport of football, but I never beat Ohio State. And I could have left after my junior year in 2015. I had a high draft grade. I could have went to the NFL. I decided to come back. The number one reason was for a chance to beat my rival, and I didn't get it done. And again, we had a talented roster, Rick. We had 11 guys from that team. We had 11 guys get drafted, 17 made NFL rosters. We were talented. This Buckeye team is talented. I'm here to say talent isn't enough. It's going to have to come from somewhere else to get that extra juice. And you can hear the subtle communication from Ryan Day at Big Ten Media Days talking about the offensive line. You can hear about the veteran leadership when they're talking about what's important to them this year. It does feel like this is going to be a renewed, explosive, exciting year for Ohio State to go make that run at a national title.
We have a crew in Columbus as we speak, watching Ohio State practice, seeing exactly what the Buckeyes are going to show the Big Ten this year. And so we'll give you more coverage of Ohio State coming up through the course of the day. Our training camp crew bringing you practice video, expert analysis, exclusive interviews with Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, select Buckeye stars. It's the Ohio State Football Training Camp Tour Show. It debuts Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern. Now, I'm not a huge uniform guy, but Illinois just dropped a uni reveal, and I have to tell you, I love it. This is what the Illini will wear during their October 19th meeting with Michigan. These unis commemorating the 100-year anniversary of Stadium Dedication Day when Red Grange turned on his freak mode against the Wolverines. And, Jake, how about those faux leather helmets?
That's what I was going to say. I've never seen that before. That's a great job by Nike and their creative team to make that happen.
Yeah,
That's a great
going
look.
back to make it feel like it was Red Grange, the galloping ghost. He was a freak back in his day, probably still would be today. Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports does a really cool thing every year, looks across the nation and lists his top freak athletes. And no surprise this year, the Big Ten has a big-time presence. You see some of the Big Ten players on the freaks list. Kenneth Grant of Michigan, Jeremiah Smith, we've talked about him already. We'll talk about him more often. You have reps from Iowa, Oregon, Abdul Carter at Penn State. Trust me, this guy is going to have an absolutely monster 2024. You can be a freak in a lot of different ways. You can have an insane motor. You can have that crazy combo of size and speed. These guys have a little bit of all of it.
Yeah, I love when Feldman drops this list too. This is like one further indication that the season is right around the corner. And let's just start with Jeremiah Smith because we've talked about him so much already. I mean, I as you can tell, I kind of got a football crush on this guy. He's phenomenal. You know what's freaky is, there's a rule. You have to spend 3 years in college before you can go to the NFL. That is a great rule. That is to protect guys. That is a man's game in the NFL. Let's slow down. But every now and then, it's very rare. You get a guy like Jeremiah Smith.
I think I know where you're going
who
here.
says he could be in the NFL after this season. And that's all the reports we've heard through spring ball. I mean, his first spring practice as an early enrollee, we're hearing these things. We're hearing it throughout camp. It seems like there's a new highlight tape every single week for Jeremiah Smith where he's one-handed touchdown, going up over two guys and making plays. He's got an NFL body. So he's listed at 6'3", 218. That's an NFL wide receiver body right there. But to me, Rick, I think what's the most freaky and what should be freaky for the rest of the conference is this guy has a mature approach to the game already. He doesn't run routes like a freshman. The game is already slowed down to him. When he's going up and rising up to make a play over, and that's a great Ohio State secondary he's practicing against every single day. The focus on the point of the ball. You don't see him dropping anything yet. The focus on his route running, the feel in zone coverage as Ohio State's shuffling through different quarterbacks as they're trying to figure out who's going to be their starter. This guy is, he's a true freshman. He's walking on campus. It's his first taste of the college experience. And yet he's standing out on a Buckeye roster. As we just said, that's one of the best in college football. It's amazing to watch.
This just keeps happening at Ohio State because all those descriptive terms and adjectives you are using to describe Jeremiah Smith, we used to describe Marvin Harrison. We used to describe Jackson Smith and Jigba before him. It is unbelievable the job that Ohio State does and the freaks that they continue to recruit into their wide receiver room. Now, you have the crush on Jeremiah Smith. I'll be honest, I have a little bit of a crush on Abdul Carter. I have seen him grow and develop from just being a physical specimen and a guy who could outrun you, out-tough you, was stronger than you, to understanding the fundamentals of playing football and what it takes and how good he can be when he combines those two elements.
Yeah, we saw when he was a true freshman, he was a freaky guy. He had those freaky tendencies. I had a coach in the NFL say, hey, you want to be known as a WTH guy. who the heck is that guy, right? When you turn on the tape, you want to say, who the heck is that guy?
I appreciate you making this a family-friendly show.
We're a family-friendly network. Yes, exactly. Might have been a little different in the NFL meeting rooms. But, we were together with our crew when he was a true freshman, and you turn on the tape and you're like, man, seriously, who the heck is
Who's that guy?
He plays at a different speed, and now we know he's 250 pounds running a 4.4 840. That's what got Chop Robinson. He was turning heads at the combine. Chop Robinson, they said this guy should be a first-round pick. That's what you're seeing with Abdul Carter, and now they're putting him at the line of scrimmage where a great edge rusher, a great defensive end can single-handedly change games. The key for him is he has all this freakiness, all the athletic abilities. It's going to be the pass rush sequencing. He's going to scare tackles with that quick get-off. But can he add a spin move, a bull rush, an up and under? Once he can do that, I mean, he could have double-digit sacks this year. Watch out for the rest of the Big Ten.
And now Tom Allen, former Indiana head coach as the DC, in-state college. What does he help in terms of development? Because I know the head coaching record wasn't necessarily, other than the 1 year, exactly what Tom wanted. But as a defensive mind and as a DC, he is a guy who is highly thought of, and I'm fascinated to watch how he works with Abdul Carter. And now it's time for Jake to deliver on the promise
Let's go.
of getting a tight end. You don't see tight ends a lot in the freaks list in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
But in the past decade, the growth of this position, the athleticism at this position, and everybody's going, well, have you heard about Colston Loveland already? It's not Colston Loveland.
No, it's not. And, we're sitting there in Ann Arbor getting ready to call the spring game, and we're talking about Colston Loveland, and whispers started to emerge. They're like, hey, listen, Colston, we think he's going to win the Mackey this year. He's going to be a first-round pick. But get to know this guy, Marlon Klein. Just started playing football. I mean, he didn't grow up playing football, right? He just started playing football. He grew up playing soccer. And then, why I love to claim this guy, he ran a 10-800 meter at 250 pounds. A 10-800 meter dash in high school. So we talk about, yes, he's the fastest tight end at Michigan. But then you start taking it a step further. They told us, our crew, that they think he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest guy on the entire team as a tight end.
As a 250-pound tight end.
That's a Kyle Pitts level of speed and explosion and acceleration. So this is a big year for him just to get his feet wet. Colston Loveland's going to be the first guy off the bus. He's going to get 50 catches, 60, 70 targets. But Marlon Klein is one of those guys with that speed that can change the game. When you dump it down to him in the flat or hit him on a shallow route, he's got that explosion to take it all the way to the house.
All right, you want to talk about explosion and take it to the house? Our next freak out west could probably run from L.A. to New York in about 10.8 seconds, as you described. Zachariah Branch is a dynamic player at receiver in the return game. He's a guy that, to me, could be one of those players who, with this move to the Big Ten, getting more eyes on you, not just the West Coast eyes, I think he could be a guy who flashes in the first couple of weeks. And it may be too early for Heisman talk because of the position, but we've seen it before. And if he's able to be a bigger part of Lincoln Riley's offense, in addition to what he does in the return game, I'm telling you right now, this kid will be a household name sooner rather than later.
Well, he flashed as a true freshman right away, wasted no time, specifically in the return game. And the challenge for him now is to evolve as a wide receiver because he has all the traits and the characteristics. So Bruce wrote that article, and apparently this guy's got a 350-pound bench press. I'm a tight end. That was my bench press. Okay, I outweigh him by 60, 70
Wait a second,
pounds.
I didn't know that number. He benches 350 as a wide-out kick returner.
Yes. And then, so they also said he ran a 1.44 10-yard split. Okay, that's very fast. That would have been fourth fastest in NFL Combine history across any position. So this guy's got a 350-pound bench. He runs a 1.44 10-yard split, which is acceleration. He's got the top-end speed. And he's one of those guys which what we saw in these kick returns early in his career, he needs a crease, and it's curtains. It's good night. I'm excited to see, though, as USC is going through a bit of a transition, hey, Caleb Williams has gone to the NFL. He should be a dynamic part of their offense.
Not just in the
jet sweeps, screens. With this speed and this strength, this is a guy that could be in that Heisman conversation, like you said, Rick.
So, and Lincoln Riley, as the offensive mind that he is, I'm sure he was watching Zachariah in year one. You know what you have because you recruited him, but what can you do on the field against other guys? And then in year two, you start to install him in extra parts of your offense. That jet sweep's a great call. Use him in more bubble screens, perhaps as a slot receiver. Get him lined up on a linebacker or a nickelback who can't keep up in coverage. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And also, we mentioned Lincoln Riley, Chip Kelly. Brian Day at Ohio State, so many other, I mean, the offensive and defensive minds coaching right now in this league. I know there's a bigger pool, but the simple brain power on all these campuses, it is absolutely amazing.
It's going to be a fun year.
All right, let's take a close look at Rutgers' 2024 schedule. You have 3 winnable non-con games. Now, the trip to Blacksburg, never easy. But then look at Big Ten play. Notably, who's not on the schedule. No Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State, no Oregon. And this with one of Greg Schiano's most talented and experienced teams during either of his stints on the banks. Dave Revson, Yogi Roth, and Howard Griffith offer up a little bit more.
And as we wrap things up here from Piscataway, gosh, I think we have to start with the schedule. I mean, let's be fair here. Rutgers has had it really hard
yes.
for its first 9 years in the Big Ten. Obviously, a function of playing in the Big Ten East and having to play Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan State every year. But man, it came back around in the other direction, and you could not be happy. You could not have a better setup than what they have this year. How important is it to take advantage of it?
It's dramatic, and it's a beautiful opportunity for this program because they, to your point, they've been better than their record has stated when you're looking at conference wins for the last few years. So, and I also love how it's laid out. I mean, look, they got some injuries, right? How healthy are they at linebacker? You have to play in the first couple games.
Right.
Probably not, right? Then you get 2 byes this year, set up at perfect times, one after the first 2, and then you go right before the final 4 of the season. So I like how it sets up for them. I think it's going to be fun because they're playing 3 of the 4 new teams, and those are different styles of play, at least out of Washington and for USC for them. So that will be fun, especially at 8 o'clock game at the Collie during the World Series, which is 11 p.m. Eastern for these guys. So they'll look at it as an opportunity, but that'll be one for me because those are totally different styles of play when you look at those teams.
There will be a lot of caffeine consumed in New Jersey, people staying up to watch that game. But this is going to be a team that's worth staying up and watching, no doubt. But Howard, it is a huge break to have the schedule lay out that way.
It really is. And twofold, really, when you think about it, right? Not only just for the young men and the people of this program to be able to take advantage of this schedule this year, but when you talk about continuing to build that momentum, continuing to build the recruiting pitch that's here in this area to continue to get those players, this is big for them. And I think that can't be understated as you continue to build this program. Getting excited about a schedule and getting excited about a team going out and having a chance to compete against some great competition is big.
That's a brilliant point because as the Big Ten gets bigger, the airtime gets tighter, right? So you can't talk about every team. And if we're talking in November about an 8-9 win team at any school, you're getting play. Rutgers will have a chance to be that school in a conversation with Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, etc. And that, to your point, to the brand, for the brand, man, that's going to be magnificent.
No doubt, and it just feels like they have a ton of momentum going right now. I know you don't necessarily want to go down this road, Howard, but you mentioned recruiting. Recruiting is going fabulously.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're putting together arguably the best class that they've ever had. Can you imagine if they have a year like we're talking about and what that could mean to build on that? Really, the opportunity is there. So, as we've talked about throughout the show, the opportunity is partly contingent on can you throw the ball well enough? What's your takeaway in terms of the one area they really were deficient a season ago?
Well, in one practice with rain going sideways and some wind, I came away impressed. I think it easily we could have said, you know what, it was hard to make a judgment today because of the weather, because etc. I can make a judgment. I thought the anticipation, the timing, most importantly, the tempo of the offense. They play in various tempos in practice. They clearly can run the football. Receiver, they got better. They're going to be more explosive. Are they elite? Way too early. Way too early to say that. But they are much better than they were a year ago. And I think most importantly, this was a team that had a blast. I mean, every touchdown, every explosive play, they're celebrating together. They're jumping around. And, you know, you can notice that. This is not a team full of individuals. They have curated an incredible culture here under Coach Schiano.
So much is going to be on the quarterback. And it's easy for me to go back and look at what happened last year, and he needed to continue to get better. But I say to see him in one practice and in the conditions, and then having an opportunity to sit here and talk with him, he's going to be just fine. He's going to do the things that he needs to do to continue to help this program move forward.
Seems comfortable. No doubt about it.
Absolutely.
The entire program seems comfortable, and I say that in a good way.
Yeah.
That they know who they are, and clearly they know they're headed in the right direction. Going to be a fun team to watch this year.
Gents, thank you. Rick Pizzo back with Jake Butt. The division is gone. There's no East. There's no West. It was the move the Big Ten had to make. And you knew that some teams would benefit from it, most notably the teams in the East, teams like Rutgers and Maryland that had gotten to new heights under Greg Schiano and Mike Loxley, but hadn't been able to get over that hump with a big win over one of the big three in Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Rutgers now seems to be set up, Jake, as the team that is the biggest winner from the change to a divisionless Big Ten, especially with the schedule they face in 24.
Yeah, and there's no need to apologize for it either.
No.
I mean, this is just what happens. Sometimes the stars do align. I look at Michigan last year on their national title run, the stars aligned. They had a veteran team, and they really weren't challenged until later in the season, so they were able to stay fresh. That's Rutgers right now. So you no longer have to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Not a lot of teams beat those guys anyways, not just Rutgers. That was a common theme for most teams. And it comes at a time where Rutgers returns. They're one of the more experienced veteran teams in the conference. Their identity is in place. Kyle Monangai somehow is the most underrated running back in the conference, even though he led the league in rushing last year. So this feels like a big year. I will say football is a mental game, though. And now the cat's out of the bag. The national media is talking about Rutgers.
And for the first time, these players are now hearing, we think you guys are really good.
That is a challenge in and of itself. And I'm excited to see how Greg Schiano navigates that because I think he's a phenomenal leader. And it does feel like this Rutgers team is ready to take that step. They can get to that 8-9. They could win. They could absolutely win 10 games this year. Can you imagine that?
Double digits.
That's the opportunity.
Definitely possible.
Yes.
Now, I will say also, if there's any Scarlet Knight fans out there saying, well, you guys are only saying this because of the schedule, no. The schedule is favorable.
They work
love
together.
this actual roster.
Yes.
You can't have one without the other and still expect success.
Right.
You need to have both.
Right. No, they work together, and that's why, again, you don't apologize for the schedule. The timing is perfect. Callie McManus there's a lot on his shoulders as the quarterback right here because if he can get them even a moderate, an average passing attack to threaten defenses and keep them honest, watch out. This is a really dangerous team.
Similar situation, I think, with Maryland. Perhaps not quite as beneficial a switch to a divisionless league in terms of schedule-wise. And obviously the biggest question to answer at quarterback after Leah had done everything for Mike Loxley's offense over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
MJ Morris is there. Billy Edwards is back. More of a running threat than particularly a passing threat. But they will find ways to throw the ball. Roman Hemby has been remarkably impressive at that position.
Yep.
And this defense has been really overlooked. The job that Brian Williams has done, he's completely transformed what Maryland's defense has been.
Yeah, and Loxley has been bold in his statements every year saying he wants to compete for conference titles. And he doesn't care what anyone else thinks about that. Some people might say, Maryland, slow down, But Loxley doesn't care. He's recruited well. He's brought in talent. And I look at the way that they played Michigan and Ohio State last year, Michigan and Ohio State in the years before. They were in those games. We're watching that Ohio State game, and Talia threw a late interception that kind of ended the game. They had a ton of self-inflicted wounds where they could have won that. They had Michigan back on the ropes. The question is for Maryland, they need to play every week the way they played against those two teams because, boy, was it close. And then you go through the entire month of October without a win. You know what I mean? So the standard cannot change. They cannot play down to their opponents or up to their opponents. For Loxley, and now doing this with a brand new quarterback and some of these new pieces, they have to play to their full potential every single week because the opportunity is there without divisions.
And I would like to add to that, you can't let one loss become two losses. And I felt like that happened last year after the Ohio State game, especially where this great opportunity was there. Leah didn't play his best. Maryland didn't play its best, and it got away in the third or fourth quarter, and I did lead to some midseason struggles. Again, though, this team goes back to the postseason, finds a way to win a bowl game, has a lot of momentum heading into this year.
Yes.
I'm not so sure you could say that any guy hired in the last 5, 7, 10 years in the Big Ten was the right fit more than Locks at Maryland. He just fits into that DMV culture and is doing wonderful things with the Terps. Okay, Penn State has been Penn State for a while now. James Franklin continues to get this team toward double-digit wins, towards big-time bowl games. but the same thing hangs over his head. It's finding a way to beat the biggest teams on your schedule. You have an experienced quarterback in Drew Aller. You have 2 running backs who, in this day and age, Jake, I have no idea how he is kept on the roster. Yeah. Keeping Katron Allen and Nick Singleton coming back. You just have to find a way in one of these seasons to get that win that is qualified as a signature win, because you go back all the way to, 2018 or 19 with that massive win over Ohio State.
So they could be a team that you could make the case benefits from no more divisions, right? And there's no protected rivalries. I thought maybe Penn State and Ohio State would be, but okay. I don't look at it like that with Penn State for every reason you just said there, where they have got to. They can't look for the easy route, because at the end of the day, Penn State has handled business against teams they were favored against. They beat all the teams they were supposed to beat. And yet throughout the season, throughout these past few years, they've come up just short against those big opponents. So that won't change. You know, Penn State on one end, no more divisions, expanded playoff. They would have been a team that's gotten into those playoffs these past few years. But again, that doesn't matter, because the truth is still the truth, that James Franklin has to unlock something to get this Penn State team to that next level. Drew Aller, this is a big year for him. You're a 5-star. This is your program. This is supposed to be the big leap year for you. You talk about the talent around him. The defense is loaded once again. This just feels like a big year for Penn State, for James Franklin altogether. But we're going to judge them. We're going to look at their schedule and say, who are the best opponents you play? How did you play against those opponents? And did you win or not? That has been the truth the past few years. It'll be the truth going forward.
And to paraphrase James himself, they've been good. They've been great at times. But what takes you to that next level, to be elite, to be among the national championship contenders, they hope to find out. Quickly, West Coast school-wise, 4 new additions come in. It's a brand new look for them. They've never worried about Big Ten East or West divisions. Is there a schedule or a team, because of its schedule, that intrigues you more than any other regarding the 4 new schools?
I do think Washington, out of all the new 4, will benefit the most. You know, I look at an Oregon or a USC, for example. Those are big-time brands that get that national recognition. But Washington, I think, is severely, criminally underrated as a program. They went to the playoffs twice. They played in the national title game last year. They've recruited and produced talent at a high level. Well, now all of a sudden they get the national stage, being in the Big Ten Conference, the deepest conference in college football. More eyeballs are going to be on their program. I think they made a phenomenal hire going to get Jed Fish. All of a sudden, I think Washington, the national respect and attention that they have deserved, they'll start to get it now going forward.
It will be difficult. This is a completely different roster. I believe 1 starter back. That's
yes.
Offense, defense, special teams from the team that played for the national title a year ago. Big Ten Olympic update time. Spencer Lee will wrestle for gold in Paris in 57 kilos. Lee won 3 matches on Thursday, including back-to-back in his quarterfinals and semifinals by 10 points each. The Iowa legend now tries to add gold to his amazing resume. Meanwhile, Washington men's rowing coach Michael Callahan has been awarded the Order of ECOS from the USOC. He's entering his 18th year as the Washington men's team head coach. He guided the US 8 to a bronze medal, and that crew included 4 Washington alumni among its 9 members. Pretty successful trip to Paris for UCLA gymnast Jordan Chiles. She won gold in the team competition, and then, after asking for a review following her floor routine, she was moved up to 3rd place, takes home a gold and a bronze. And here's the best news for the Bruins. She just announced she will return for another season in Westwood. As the Olympics continue, so does Big Ten. Today, we're going to combine the two. We're going to ask Jake to take some Olympic disciplines and give us the football players that would fit best in those disciplines. We start with the sprint competitions.
Well, we'll start with the guy we were talking about earlier, the one with the 1-4-4 10-yard split,
it's a good
Zachariah
start.
Branch. I mean, if you're elite returner, you got to be fast. That's the easy one. Give me Zachariah Branch.
All right, Zachariah Branch, the Big Ten's version of Noah Lyles. Let's go to the shot put. Who's the version of Ryan Krauser who just can't lose?
We saw Kenneth Grant, right? We've seen him just lock out offensive linemen. We've seen him run down running backs and quarterbacks. Kenneth Grant, I think he was top 5 on Bruce Feldman's freak list. Give me him in the shot put.
And not just Krauser. Joe Kovacs, a Penn State alum, has been one of the best in the world the last couple of years. Trouble is, he lives in the Ryan Krauser world. The distance runner. Hey, Cole Hawker, by the way, congrats. Oregon alum in that amazing 1,500 meter. Which football player are you choosing to run the long distances?
I'm just going to say Hunter Waller, just because he runs the long distances.
He's everywhere all the time.
He's everywhere all the time. He never misses a snap. He's always healthy. He plays every single down. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and I think he should get some more respect.
I think hurdles is insane. To watch these Olympians running at the speed that they're running, and oh, by the way, you have to jump over a giant obstacle on the way. What football player runs the hurdles?
I got a crush on this guy. It's Jeremiah Smith. We see him going up over everybody, so I'm sure he'd be a great hurdler.
He's pretty good at basically everything he
Whatever
does.
you want him
We're
to
going to
do.
see a lot of him this year in the scarlet and gray. And finally, this is a little bit weird, but we're going to ask you which football player would be the best gymnast. You got to throw the floor exercise, the pommel, everything involved in there.
And mindset, too,
Yes.
right? Like, you got to be tough. So I'm going to go with Dylan Thieneman.
Oh, I like that choice.
Exploded on the scenes, did everything as a safety, played special teams, got that exact body type you're looking for, and I know he will not quit. That's
Yeah,
Dylan Thieneman.
that's probably got to be a larger size unitard than the U.S. Olympic Committee
yes.
usually has for most of their gymnasts. For Jake Butt, I'm Rick Pizzo. A lot of fun. Thanks for being with us on this edition of Big Ten Today.